There are things you carry in your heart without knowing how much they weigh. You just go on living, kicking the can down the road, telling yourself everything's fine, that it'll pass, that time will fix it. And time does pass, but it doesn't fix a thing. Time just pushes the immediate pain away, like someone sweeping dirt under a rug. Then one day, someone lifts that rug, and the dirt is still there, untouched, waiting. My name is Robert Miller. I'm 75 years old. I live in a small apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Denver. An apartment that used to be a house full of life, of the smell of freshly brewed coffee, of laundry hanging on the line out back, of a woman's voice calling my name in the morning. Today, it only holds the silence I built myself, brick by brick, over 40 years of wrong choices. I'm a retired civil engineer. I spent my life building bridges, overpasses, structures meant to last for decades, an irony I only understood far too late. The one foundation I should have reinforced was my own family's, and that's the very one I let crack. Marianne Davis Miller. That's the name my mouth is learning to say carefully again, like someone holding fine china after nearly dropping it. We met on the campus of CU Boulder back in '71. She was an English Lit major, and I was in engineering. She had a laugh that filled the whole hallway. It wasn't a loud laugh, you know. It was an honest one. The kind of laugh you can't fake because it comes straight from the soul. We got married in 1975, a simple ceremony at the Cathedral Basilica downtown. Her dark hair was pinned up with a white flower she'd picked out herself. I remember every detail of that day with a clarity that hurts, because it's exactly the kind of memory you try to hold on to when everything else is gone. The first few years were good. Not perfect, but genuinely good. We had 2 kids, Ryan and Patricia. Marianne took care of the house with a dedication I mistook for ease, as if it cost her nothing, as if dinner made itself, as if the kids' problems solved themselves by magic, as if the lightness with which she managed our lives wasn't, in fact, a daily silent effort. While she was building our home from the inside, I was building projects all over the city. My career was taking off. The responsibilities grew, and with them came something I couldn't name at the time, but which I recognize easily today, an ego that slowly consumed me like rust on a steel beam. I started to think I was more than I was. I started to think I deserved more than I had, not because I was lacking anything, but because I lacked the humility to recognize what was already mine. And it was in that empty space, created by my own arrogance, that the betrayal began. I'm not going to hide behind pretty words. I was unfaithful to Marianne, not once, many times. The first was in 1984, during a business trip to Chicago. A colleague on the project, young, attentive, she looked at me with an admiration that I, fool that I was, confused with love. It wasn't love. It was the projection of a man who had stopped seeing himself in his own wife's eyes. When I got back to Denver, Marianne was waiting for me with dinner on the table and the kids asleep. She asked how the trip was. I said it was tiring. I smiled. I sat down. I ate the pot roast she'd made just the way I liked, with the garlic and herbs I loved, and kept the secret locked away inside me like a drawer I'd thrown away the key to. The problem is, keys you throw away always turn up. Always. In the years that followed, I distanced myself from Marianne in a way she felt, but I denied. I became sarcastic when she asked where I'd been. I became cold when she tried to get close. And worst of all, I became cruel in a veiled way, the kind that leaves no visible mark but corrodes from the inside. I minimized her feelings, laughed at her concerns, called it drama when it was real pain. She never raised her voice. That was Marianne. Quiet where I was loud, patient where I was impulsive. And for a long time, I mistook her patience for acceptance. I thought her silence was a sign that everything was okay. It wasn't. Marianne's silence was the silence of someone gathering strength for a conversation that would change everything. That conversation happened on a Thursday in May of 1998, when our kids had already moved out, and the two of us were living in that apartment that suddenly felt way too big. I was in the living room, reading the paper, and she came in with 2 cups of coffee. She set mine on the end table next to the sofa and just stood there, looking at me for a beat too long to be casual. I lowered the paper to my lap. I looked at her. And then Marianne asked, in a voice that didn't tremble but carried the weight of years, "Robert, have you been honest with me in this marriage?" The question landed in the air like a stone in a still lake. I felt my heart race. My throat went dry. And instead of telling the truth, instead of opening that drawer I'd locked 14 years earlier, I looked her in the eye and said yes, that I'd always been honest, that she was being dramatic. She didn't answer right away. She just kept looking at me for a few more seconds, with those dark eyes that had always told me more than any words could. Then she picked up her own coffee cup, took it to the bedroom, and closed the door without a sound. I went back to my newspaper, as if nothing had happened, as if the woman who had shared my life for over 20 years hadn't just given me one last chance that I had squandered with a lie. That night, I lay down next to her in bed and pretended to be asleep while she lay awake in the darkness. I could hear her breathing, uneven, restrained, the breathing of someone holding something immense inside their chest, and I did what I always did. I just rolled over and closed my eyes. It was the most cowardly choice of my life, and the consequences would take their time, but when they came, they would arrive in a way that no engineering project I ever built could have prepared me to withstand. If this story is hitting home for you, make sure you subscribe to our channel and drop a comment letting us know what city you're tuning in from. Stick around. I promise this will be the best story you hear all year. After that night, the house changed in a way there's no right word for. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a dramatic break with yelling and broken objects. It was a quiet transformation, like when the first real cold snap hits in the fall without any warning. Suddenly the temperature drops, the air turns sharp, and you realize the warmth that was there before is gone, without giving you a chance to say goodbye. Marianne started waking up earlier than usual. I'd find her in the kitchen, her back to me, staring out the window while she waited for the coffee to brew. When I'd say her name, she'd answer. But the answer had a tone I'd never heard from her before. A polite distance, as if she were treating me with the courtesy you give a stranger in an elevator. I tried to convince myself she was overreacting, that she was being dramatic, that I'd said everything was fine, so it should have been fine. But Marianne's body began to say what her words wouldn't. She lost weight. She slept poorly. She stopped tending to the plants she loved so much, those pots of ferns and begonias that had decorated our balcony for years. The leaves started to wither one by one, and I'd look at them without understanding they were a mirror of what was happening to her. One Sunday in August, my son Ryan came to visit with his family. He brought his wife and our 2 little grandkids. Marianne lit up that day in a way that cut me to the core, because it was then that I understood just how much she had faded in her day-to-day life with me. With the children, she laughed out loud, played on the floor, told stories with a different voice for each character. It was the Marianne I had stopped seeing. The Marianne who still existed, just not for me. At lunch, while Ryan was helping me with the dishes, he lowered his voice and asked if Mom was okay, said she seemed exhausted. I told him it was just her age, that she was fine. Ryan gave me a heavy, silent look that reminded me so much of his mother's, and I just changed the subject, started talking about the Broncos. The weeks went by, and then something happened that pulled the rug out from under me in a way I never expected. One afternoon in October, I came home early after a meeting was canceled. The door was closed, but not locked. I walked in quietly and found Marianne in the living room, sitting on the floor, with our old box of photographs spread out around her. It was an old shoebox, lined with faded wrapping paper, filled with pictures we'd taken over the decades. Our trip to Aspen in '79, Ryan's first birthday, Patricia's graduation, the Christmas of '91 when we had that record-breaking blizzard, and the kids went absolutely wild. She was holding one photo with both hands. She was trembling slightly. When she noticed I was there, she raised her head and looked at me for what felt like an eternity. Then she said, with a serenity that hurt more than any scream ever could, "You know what's the saddest part, Robert? In all of these pictures, I'm genuinely smiling. I was genuinely happy, and you were there, but you were never really there." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She carefully placed the photo back in the box, slowly got up from the floor, and went to the bedroom. She didn't slam the door. She just closed it. And I was left standing there, in the middle of those scattered photos, feeling like I was looking at the wreckage of a structure I had sabotaged myself. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed in the living room until 3 in the morning, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside, the endless stream of traffic on Spear Boulevard. And for the first time in 40 years, I decided I was going to tell the truth. That the next morning, I would sit down with Marianne, look her in the eyes, and tell her everything. Not for absolution, not because I deserved forgiveness, but because she deserved the truth. She always had. I fell asleep with that decision in my heart and woke up with it still there, solid as a concrete pillar. But when I got up, Marianne wasn't in the kitchen. There was no coffee brewing. The plants on the balcony had been watered, which surprised me. I knocked on her bedroom door and she told me to come in. She was dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed, with a small suitcase by her feet. She looked at me without anger, with a calm that took me years to understand wasn't coldness. It was a woman who had made a difficult decision and had made peace with it before telling me. "I'm going to stay at Patricia's for a while," she said. "I need some space to think. I'm not okay, Robert, and I need to take care of myself." I swallowed hard. "Marianne, you don't have to say anything right now." Her voice was soft but final. "I waited for a conversation you never started. I asked questions you never answered honestly, and I've reached a point where continuing to wait is hurting me in a way I can no longer ignore." She stood up, picked up her suitcase, walked past me, and headed for the door. At the threshold of the room, she stopped. She turned back to me. "You were the great love of my life, Robert. And because of that, what you did hurts with a force that has no measure. But I can't carry this pain by myself anymore while you pretend it doesn't exist." And then she left. I heard the front door close, the sound of the elevator descending, the silence that remained. I stood in that room for I don't know how long. And then, in that silence, what I had avoided for decades finally happened. The whole truth arrived. No disguise, no escape. Every affair, every lie, every time I had seen the pain in her eyes and chosen to look away. It all came back at once, with a weight that literally buckled my knees, and I sank to the floor of my own bedroom, like a man who finally understands the scale of the ruin he has built. I called Patricia that afternoon. She answered with a tense voice, the kind of tension you hear when someone already knows what's happening. She said her mom had arrived safely. She said we needed to talk. And the following week, sitting around the table at her house in Aurora with Marianne and both our kids present, I told them everything. Every detail that needed to be said. Not as a confession to relieve my own guilt, but as restitution to a woman who deserved all the truth I had stolen from her for 40 years. Marianne didn't cry. She just listened, her eyes fixed on me, and when I finished, she was silent for a long time. Then she said, Thank you for finally respecting me enough to be honest. It wasn't the forgiveness that absolves. It was the honesty that gave her back the dignity I should have preserved from the very beginning. Today, Marianne and I no longer live together, but we still talk. She tends to her pots of begonias at Patricia's house. I've learned to make my own coffee, and every morning I wake up to this silence in the apartment. I'm reminded that silence has a price, and you pay that price every single day, with interest, for the rest of your life. I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I'm telling it because if even one person hears this and chooses honesty before it's too late, then maybe this weight I carry will have served some purpose. The truth hurts, but secrets destroy. And destroying the person you love most, slowly, with little lies, is the kind of project that no engineer in the world can ever rebuild.